Hi everyone and welcome to my Patreon site. My name's Henry Hyde and some of you may well have heard of me before. I've been reasonably prominent in the hobby since I launched Battle Games magazine back in 2006, a magazine that was the result of me being a member of the old school wargaming group. And on the shelves behind me there, you can probably see a few old school books that you might even recognise by authors like Charles Grant and Donald Featherstone. However, my own wargaming encompasses a great deal more than just old school gaming, even though I do still love my old Spencer Smiths, as you can see from some of the images coming up on your screen now. And I'm proudly in possession now of some of the original Spencer Smith figures that were shown in Charles Grant's The War Game that was first published back in 1971. So I launched Battle Games magazine in 2006 and I ran it completely on my own for something like 5 years, commissioning articles, organising the advertising, washing up the bottles and all those usual things that you do when you're completely self-employed. And it sort of took the wargaming scene by storm for a few years. And then come 2011, I hit a few problems, to be honest with you. And the magazine I ended up selling to a company called Atlantic Publishers, who were also the publishers of Miniature Wargames magazine at the time. And so in December 2011, Battle Games got purchased by Atlantic Publishers, and then I was made the editor-designer of the combined Miniature Wargames with Battle Games. The two titles merged in 2013, and then in 2015, Atlantic Publishers sold that up to a big company called Warner's, who still run Miniature Wargames, and I carried on in my position till late 2016 when I decided, you know what, I've had enough after 10 years. I think it's time I moved on and did some other things. So, exciting times. I then had a number of family issues to deal with. My mum passed away, and so anyone who's been through that kind of thing knows what it's like. And I emerged from the other end of that, still as a graphic designer, taking on graphic design projects, but not really as heavily involved in the wargaming scene. And I missed it, to be honest. And I was looking around for things to do. I wasn't going to start another magazine. Been there, done that. But it was around about that kind of time that, end of 2017, 2018, that sort of time, that Patreon was first making a showing as an option for creative people. And so I launched my own Patreon, and here it is, back in late 2018. And I was very grateful and fortunate that quite a few people came on board pretty much straight away. And I've been running Patreon with all its various creative and financial ups and downs ever since. Anyway, so why would you want to become one of my patrons? Especially, why would you want to become one of my paying patrons? Anything from a sergeant at something like $2.50 a month, $3 a month, right up to a general at something like $50 a month. And it's surprising, I've got quite a few high-ranking officers in the officers' mess behind the scenes, which is fantastic. Well, all I can say is Patreon works in exactly the same way as in the old days. A composer or an artist or someone like that would have patrons back in the 18th, 19th century, who are people who support their creative work. And that's exactly how Patreon works. So some people on Patreon are musicians, some make videos or films, others may be doing all sorts of other funky things, games designers and that kind of stuff. What I provide on Patreon is effectively a multimedia magazine. So I do blog posts, I do the usual things like I run polls and get your opinion. This is really important. From time to time I get the opinion and input from my patrons on various things. I now, of course, produce what has become a reasonably well-known Battle Chat podcast, which comes out, sometimes once a month, sometimes twice a month. It depends on how well I can, how I can organise potential guests on the show. but that varies. I also do my own little off-the-cuff podcasts that are about half an hour each. At regular intervals, probably 2 or 3 times a year, I do what's called the Sergeants Plus Q&A session. So anyone who has actually become a paid subscriber at the rank of Sergeant and above can submit questions on a form that I provide on Google Forms, and I then look at them live, as it were. After I've been amassing questions for a week or so, I then cut off the form, download it, and look at what questions I've been asked, and I sit there and start recording. And those recordings, well, some of them have been really quite long, 2, 3, I think the longest was even nearly 4 hours, which basically I end up with no voice at all, but it's quite fun to do. And quite a challenge, because I don't know what the questions are going to be. They just jump out at me, and I just do my best to answer them as best I can. So that's something that you get exclusively as a paying member of my Patreon, and is also exclusive in terms of listening to it as well. When it comes to the Battle Chat podcasts, I usually release those, and patrons have them exclusively for somewhere between 1 and 2 weeks, depending on the timing of it, whether there's, bank holidays and other interruptions, whether it's a topic that I think is so important actually it needs to get out to a wider audience more quickly. But usually they're exclusive to patrons for between 1 and 2 weeks, so that's another benefit you get. Also, I run a shop with digital products on a platform called PayHip. You may have heard of PayHip. So I have a shop for my Gladius publications on PayHip, and all those digital publications, they might be PDFs, they might be images to download, they might be audiobooks, that kind of thing. As a patron, according to your rank, you get a discount that might range from anything from 10% off the price shown on the PayHip site, right up to completely free if you're a general. So higher ranks get massive discounts on my PayHip products. So as well as supporting all those kind of things, the podcasts, the blog posts, videos, I create videos as well that go onto YouTube. As well as all those things, there's also a really important role that my patrons play, which is that they help support me when I am dedicating a lot of time to writing books. And if you see on the shelf over my shoulder there, and they'll come up on the screen, you may remember the Wargaming Compendium, which came out in 2013. There's some important news about that. Wargaming Campaigns that came out in 2022, followed by a little flurry of my own self-published books, the Tabletop Battle Tactics, then there's the Martinstadt 1744 Imaginations campaign, and my Shot, Steel and Stone rules, which have been surprisingly popular, and all those are still on sale. Quick note about the Wargaming Compendium. This is a really important point for my patrons, and if you join and become one of my patrons, which is that I have at long last, after 11 years, heading on for 12 years, managed to get the complete rights back from the original publisher's pen and sword, so that I'm now free to update and republish the Wargaming Compendium. Obviously, a lot's happened in the 11 or 12 years since it was first published, and certainly, I finished writing it probably a year or so before that, so an awful lot needs updating. Completely new pictures, whole new sections on things like 3D printing, for example, which of course is a big thing nowadays that didn't even exist back when I first wrote that book. A whole lot of companies have disappeared, but new ones have been born, new painting techniques, a whole mass of stuff. And I really want my patrons to get involved in helping me to bring that book bang up to date by giving me suggestions. And the other thing I do, as I did with the Wargaming Campaigns book, I recruit a team of beta readers from amongst my patrons, and they played a fantastic role when I did the Wargaming Campaigns book pointing out things that, I think you went on a bit too long about that, Henry, but oh, crikey, Henry, you completely missed out talking about X, Y, or Z, or I think you could say more about this or in a different way. They played a fantastic role, a valuable role in making the Wargaming Campaigns book as good as it could possibly be, and also ensuring that it was pretty much error-free, quite astonishingly so. And obviously both the Wargaming Compendium and Wargaming Campaigns went on to be bestsellers in their category, both in their hardback form and in Kindle format. So that's a really important role that my patrons also play, and I'd love to have you on board to help out as I embark now, as I'm recording this first thing in the new year of 2025. I'm hoping to have a new version of the book ready to go, certainly by the end of this year. It's a big book, 520 odd pages, but I'm hoping to get it ready. And I may also be looking at crowdfunding options and all that kind of thing, so that your experience as patrons is incredibly helpful to me in my own self-publishing journey. So also, we have now on Patreon, there are chat rooms, and we have a number of chat rooms going on the Patreon site, which you can also access via the app on your mobile device. There's a new Patreon app, and we have chat rooms for just general chat, and we have chat for game reports and for painting and modelling. That's a really busy one, and if we see a need for an extra chat room, I'll make one, and you're welcome to use it. And that's a growing part of the Patreon community that we have built around battle games on Patreon. So that's just about it. Please, therefore, do consider becoming a patron. And if you do become a patron, well, thank you so much. It means an enormous amount to me. And the relationship that I have with my patrons is, I've got to tell you, it's been life-changing for me, particularly when a few years ago, end of 2019, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. Some of you may have seen the videos I made on YouTube, all about what it's like going through prostate cancer, both in terms of the physical toll it takes on you and what, and also the mental toll it takes on you. And I made no secret of the fact that after my radiotherapy had finished, which was towards the end of 2020, I then went through a very tough period to do with my own mental health suffered a lot, and I had a bit of a breakdown in early 2021. And I spoke openly and documented that as well, because my feeling is, if I've endured something, if I learned something in the process and can pass that on, well, that is something I can do, which may be of help to others. And I have to tell you, I was completely overwhelmed by the response I got to the videos, both about the prostate cancer and about the mental health issues. In fact, I briefly ran a new podcast called Inside Your Head, which is still on Apple Podcasts somewhere, all about mental health and interviewing other people, talking about mental health psychology and that kind of thing. And that's something I'm kind of introducing gradually a bit more into my Battle Games on Patreon, because whenever it's been mentioned in the podcast and so forth, people have gone, oh, that's really interesting. And so, I listen to what people say, and I'll do a bit more of that kind of thing. Also, another thing I have to say is, when I've been through tough times financially, and the last few years have been difficult, what with cancer, COVID, and a mental breakdown, my patrons have been phenomenal, and I've run a couple of appeals when basically it's like, oh, I think I'm staring bankruptcy in the face, and my patrons have been absolutely amazing in the support that they've given me. I don't want to think that that's in any way compulsory. I'm just mentioning it in passing, that this is part of the incredibly, pretty intimate kind of relationship that I do have with my patrons. I don't hide anything. I'm a kind of guy who just sits in front of a camera or in front of a microphone and speaks the truth as I see it. And therefore, I'm incredibly grateful to the amazing support that I have been given by my patrons on a number of occasions. And that's part of the kind of community of goodwill that you will be joining by becoming one of my patrons, and I'd love to have you on board for that. Just to let you know, the patrons come from literally all over the world. I know I've got patrons in Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa, and mainland Europe, and France, and Germany, and Spain, and Portugal, and lots in the UK, obviously lots in the States and Canada. Doesn't matter where you are. You can become one of my patrons, and Patreon will give you the cost of patronage in your own currency. And so there we are. So why not give it a go? You know, even if you just come on board for a little while. I accept that I'm not to everyone's taste, and the kind of stuff I do may not be to your taste. But by now you will see there is a massive back catalogue of, I think it's something heading now to 115, 120 podcasts, something like that. And something like 450 heading to 500 posts overall. Lots of little snippety things, some big things, some tiny things, some little short posts, some much longer posts, some that read much more magazine-y. And so there you are. Effectively, Battle Games on Patreon is a sort of multimedia version of the magazine that I used to run, but without the hassle of dealing with print subscriptions and going to the post office with bundles of post and worrying about postage prices and all that kind of stuff. It just gets beamed straight to your laptop or desktop computer, or indeed to your handheld device, whether it's an iPhone or anything else. All right, folks, I think that's enough, gives you enough of a flavour. And as I've been talking, some images have popped up of some of the stuff I've been talking about. One of the other benefits I wanted to talk about is that if you become a patron at a senior level, that is to say kind of major and above, then there's going to be opportunities for you coming up for sure in 2025 of getting involved in one of my Imaginations campaigns. You'll see, if you look back through the back catalogue, look for Borg and Mark, you'll see that there's been some stuff already mentioned about that and a bit of chat about it, but for various reasons it didn't happen in 2024, but by goodness, it's definitely going to happen in 2025. So if you become a senior patron, there's a chance that you can get involved in my Imaginations campaign, which I'll be umpiring and running and organising games for and that kind of stuff, which is an exciting thing to look forward to in the coming year. So thanks very much for listening. I hope I haven't rabbited on for too long. There's been quite a lot to talk about, and there's lots for you to look through. Even now, if you just out of curiosity, you want to have a look and see what's going on. You've got plenty to look at now, loads and loads of back episodes of the podcast, for example, to listen to that will keep you happy whilst you're painting. So thanks for watching.